Rajni, what's wrong?
Tom, I have a script and I don't know what to do with it. Should I burn it? Feed it to my cat?
You need some writers group therapy.
Hello and welcome to Writers Group Therapy.
I'm Tom.
And I'm Rashni. We're writers helping writers. Are you ready for your session? The doctors are in. Okay, so very rarely do we talk about new releases, but I thought this was actually a very interesting point. You saw Black Panther, right?
Yes, I did.
All right, and you saw Wonder Woman, right?
Yes.
And so what did you think of the two movies in general?
I liked both the movies, both very full of action, good stories, great characters. I thought they had a lot of similarities because they had the strong female characters. They had a world that was separate from our world, so we got to see a different world, little world building going on. I get a little tired of seeing superheroes in New York City and Los Angeles and Metropolis, whatever the three biggies, or Gotham. This way you get to see a different environment, and it's not your stereotypical big city superhero.
Mm-hmm. So going back to strong female characters, what did you think of each movie in regards to how they portrayed women?
Black Panther had a unique difference to Wonder Woman. Wonder Woman had a whole island full of strong Amazonian warriors, but then Wonder Woman leaves and goes to America and fights with Steve Trevor in man's world, as they say. Whereas Wakanda in the Black Panther is where most everything takes place, and it's a egalitarian society. Men and women work in equal roles and do similar roles. I mean, there's a king of Wakanda, but he's got this huge staff of advisors and warriors and scientists who are all these they're men and women, and they all work together equally to save Wakanda. So it's different from from Wonder Woman. In fact, that Wonder Woman goes from not a matriarchy of Themyscira to a patriarchy. So you're seeing two distinctly different worlds, whereas we're seeing the Black Panther's world is uniquely egalitarian. At least that's how I saw it.
See, I loved Black Panther. I thought that it did way better for how it portrayed women in a positive light and like advancing the cause of feminism. Sorry to say that, because I'm not like a huge like quote unquote feminist. Like I'm not, I'm burning bras or whatever, but I do think women need to be portrayed in a more positive light in media. And I think the best way Black Panther did that was because the way they set up the society, it was just accepted that women had positions of strength and power alongside the men. The women were running the army and they were in the royal guard and they were creating all this technology. And interesting, they never talked down to women at all in that movie. They made a couple little racial jokes, and even the racial jokes sort of felt to me more like outsider versus insider, not white versus black. But with the way they portrayed the women were always equal to the men in how they were treated and how their thoughts on like the mission or how to run the country, their thoughts were what's the word? Just as honored as being as the men's were. And it was just
they were
because
valued equally.
Yes, thank you. And I think it was just the way that the society was. They weren't, it was just it was a very subtle thing that they did in the writing, but because that's the way they set up the world, they didn't have to hit you over the head with women are equal in the society. It was just something that was, this is how it is.
Right. It's like the best person for the job got the job, no matter what it was, whether they were fighting or whether they were, the sister the princess who was, this great scientist and inventor. She was like Q for James Bond, but for, the king. So that was really cool, and she did such a great job. It was very natural. It wasn't like anyone had to force it and say, look, I'm the scientist, I'm smart.
Yeah.
She was just doing her job, and it was just very natural, and it flowed, and it was exciting and interesting, and it didn't make you think like about it, but it was just how it should be, I guess, is what you would say.
Yeah, yeah. And it was interesting because with Wonder Woman, and we've discussed this in a previous podcast, I liked it. I thought it had some issues. I remember my coworker, who's a YA librarian, gave me a comic book to read, Legend of Wonder Woman, Volume 1 Origins. I guess it's like a reboot of the series. And she's like, oh, read this. You'll love it. This is what the movie was partly based on. And I read it. And the thing that struck me about the comic, I wish they had actually just used the comic as the entire source material for the movie. They reintroduced her best friend, they introduced Steve, but the Wonder Woman comic that my coworker had me read was more about women working together. She has her friend Etta, who has no superpowers, and Etta has her girl group, and they're like, we don't care. We're going to go into World War I with you, and we're going to pilot a plane and get you over there. And it's really lovely. It's women helping women. Whereas in the movie, it's Wonder Woman by herself, and then her sidekick is a man. And they don't even, Etta's kind of like in there, sort of, but they just sort of briefly meet at a party. This is supposed to be her best friend eventually.
Yeah.
They don't really set it up. So yeah, and I get it. She's going from this all-female society to this mixed world, and it's very different. But just because you're a one-woman show doesn't necessarily advance the cause of feminism.
Right. And that was set in the 1940s, 1950s. So, it was a reflection of the time. But
Actually, it was
that's the
World War
great.
One.
It was World War One. Oh,
So even earlier.
sorry about that. Oh well, I think it was No, it was Captain America. That was World War II. That was the Nazis. So, sorry, I got my superheroes mixed up. That's a whole different universe. That's Marvel.
For
what am I talking about?
You're better at superheroes than I am.
Yeah. But what I was gonna say was, when you see in Black Panther that the women were fighting, the men fighting them didn't hold back. It was everyone went into the fight equally. There was no one pretending that they were stronger or better than anyone else because of their gender. It was just, what side are you on? And in fact, I think that there was a husband and wife wind up facing off at one point, and like, who are you going to kill me over this? Because I'm fighting for this and you're fighting for that. So that it was basically they were allowed to have their own opinions, and they fought for them, and then it kind of became a good versus evil thing at that point, and people had to realize, what side are you fighting for? So it really was mostly about the values and the right versus wrong than men versus women. In fact, I think the only thing I thought was in any way derogatory or speaking down to a woman was when Claw says something to the princess. He talks to her like, "Oh, you're gonna fight me, princess?" Like, princess is a delicate thing that needs, that can't fight. I felt that was what that was the only tone in which that phrase was used, in a derogatory sense. Otherwise,
was that Claw, or was that the cousin?
Oh, it was the cousin. You're right. Yeah, it was the cousin. Yeah, because he was already dead at that point. Yeah. So yeah, the cousin. Yeah.
Yeah. But it was interesting too, speaking of equality in the society. This is going to sound so weird, but I think the other thing, the way they set up the world to make it so you knew that it was an equal society. And I know this is going to sound such a weird point, but the fact that you could challenge the fitness of the new up and coming Black Panther, right? All the tribe, they had the ritual challenge day, and all the tribe leaders could challenge him if they wanted to. And there was even that little fake out where the sister speaks up and everyone's like, oh, and you think, oh, wow, even a woman could challenge his rule if she really wanted to. And to me, that also speaks to, again, just, it was so subtle. They didn't hit you over the head with it. But, if somebody else, if another leader thought, well, hey, you're not good to rule us, then cool, I'll step in. Versus, if it was like in a true monarchy where it's always father to son, maybe if, the older son dies, it goes to the younger one or whatever, but it's always in that same lineage. They don't tell you the whole history of Wakanda. Maybe another tribe had challenged at one point and, the transfer of power went to a different tribe. I don't know. Or maybe it just stayed in the Black Panther lineage. But it could have theoretically gone to a different tribe at one point.
Right, and the world of Wakanda is unique, and I look at it as almost like a science experiment. This is a completely isolated, city that has developed, and I guess they're kind of xenophobic. They've stayed away from the outside world and hidden themselves, so they kind of developed on their own in a unique, this egalitarian, society, and only now when they go out into the world do they discover, how the outside world has a lot of injustice, and that's kind of like one of the main themes of the movie is that should Wakanda, maintain their little bubble and their society as it is, or should they share their success and technology and society and culture with the rest of the world? And I think that's part of the arc of the story is the king and how he decides what to do for his people and for the world. So
interesting that they put it now too, because think about it, if they had said it back in like 1940 or something, and Wakanda's like, should we tell the world? Yes, we should. And then people be like, but women have their place in the kitchen. You can't create this technology. I mean, it is kind of interesting that they're like, let's put it in 2017 versus, 1800 or something.
Yeah. Well, they did a lot of interesting things in the movie about Wakanda, showing how technologically advanced they were, yet how they also, with that advancement, lived in peace and harmony with nature and the environment. Because, I mean, they had giant rhinos they played with and kissed and whatever. I don't know, it was weird.
I like that part.
But that was kind of funny, yeah. But the idea is that here is an advanced society that, well, they had the technology and the vibranium and that aspect to it too, but they were able to use their resources and thrive and grow without destroying their environment. So there's also, I think, a environmental message in there too. So
yeah,
not just feminism.
all the isms: environmentalism, feminism, whatever ism.
Social equality.
So what do you guys think? Which movie did you prefer and why? Let us know at WG Therapy on Twitter. You can also check us out online at writersgrouptherapy.com. And if you like what you hear, subscribe and share it with your friends. We'll see you next week.